What are we covering in tonight's summary of the Israel-Hamas War, day 129? The two Israeli hostages who were rescued by the IDF yesterday were reunited with their families. They stated that they were held in a family home in the town of Rafah and suffered from hunger during captivity, but they were not beaten or tortured. After yesterday, the al-Qassam Brigades reported that two Israeli hostages were killed in IDF bombings and 8 were wounded. Today, the brigades reported that 3 of the 8 who were wounded died of their wounds. In the West Bank, dozens of Israeli settlers stormed the Palestinian villages of Dama, Asira, Akabilia, as well as the town of Hawara. Reportedly, they torched homes and set fire to cars. 2 Palestinians are reported shot and injured. Reuters reported today that France has delivered to Lebanon a proposal to resolve the ongoing escalation between Israel and Hezbollah diplomatically. Sources stated that Biden claims that he is trying to convince Israel to agree to a ceasefire, but Netanyahu is, quote, giving him hell. Biden repeatedly stating, quote, Netanyahu wants the war to drag on so he can remain in power. Hello everyone, I am Alon Burstein, visiting assistant professor in the Department of Political Science and Israel Institute fellow at the University of California, Irvine. Here I bring you the summary of the last 24 hours of the Israel-Hamas War. It's currently the evening of February 12th, 2024 in the United States, the morning of February 13th, 2024 in the Middle East. Starting with the hostage situation, the 2 Israeli hostages who were rescued by the IDF yesterday were reunited with their families. They stated that they were held in a family home in the town of Rafah and suffered from hunger during captivity, but they were not beaten or tortured. In addition, they reported receiving some medications recently, which may be the first indication that some of the hostages did in fact receive medicines as a result of the medical deal that was brokered in the middle of January. So I remind everyone, in the middle of January, a medical deal was brokered. Israel was going to allow an increased amount of medical supplies to enter the Gaza Strip. In turn, medicines were going to be bought specifically and supplied to the hostages. Prime Minister Netanyahu stated that he received assurances from Qatar that Israel would receive proof that the medicines reached the hostages. That proof never came. This may be the first indication that some of the hostages did in fact receive some of the medications. Other news related to the hostages. After yesterday, the al-Qassam Brigades reported that 2 Israeli hostages were killed in IDF bombings and 8 were wounded. Today they reported that 3 of the 8 who were wounded died as a result of their injuries. Al-Qassam stated that they are waiting to release the names until the others who are wounded stabilize. This means that according to the al-Qassam Brigades, 5 Israeli hostages have been killed in IDF bombings in the last 24 hours. The White House congratulated Israel on the successful rescue operation yesterday and added that the crisis will not be over until Hamas releases all of the hostages. Related to the hostage deal, after intensive behind-the-scenes negotiations, Israel has agreed to send a delegate to the negotiations that are going to take place in Cairo. The head of the Mossad, Deni Barnea, is going to meet CIA Director William Barnes. They are going to meet with the Qatari Prime Minister Mohammed Athani, as well as with the Egyptian head of intelligence Abbas Kamel, to again reignite the hostage negotiations. This came after President Biden asked Netanyahu to participate in the talks even if he does not see where they are leading. Israel continues to state that Hamas's response is a non-starter and is not going to be seen as an opening stage in the negotiations. Israel is saying that Hamas has to give a different answer in order to start negotiations. Otherwise, Israel is just coming to the talks in order to listen. And relating to this, Hamas representative in Lebanon, Osama Hamdan, stated that Israel's response in the negotiations are a withdrawal even from the Paris understandings, and that Israel is blocking the possibility of a deal. He stated that the positions that Israel has given does not allow the freedom of movement of Palestinians within the Gaza Strip, does not allow internally displaced Palestinians to return to the northern parts of the Gaza Strip, or even the opening of crossings to allow humanitarian aid to enter the Gaza Strip. Both sides right now are saying that the other one is blocking any movement in a deal. There is going to be this meeting in Cairo in which the sides are going to negotiate. There may be some breakthroughs. We will wait and see. Moving on to the fighting in the Gaza Strip. After 5 days with no launching of rockets or missiles, rockets targeted the areas surrounding the Gaza Strip in the last 24 hours. It was a barrage sent towards the area of Ein HaBasor. In addition, regarding the fighting in the Gaza Strip, in the northern parts of the Gaza Strip, there were several rounds of bombings reported in the southern parts of Gaza City. Several people were reported injured. In the central parts of the Gaza Strip, there were also substantial bombings reported in the areas of Deir al-Balah. 15 Palestinians were reported killed. In Deir al-Balah right now, there are intensive bombings reported in the last several days. The IDF has not moved its ground operations into Deir al-Balah. It is possible this is even one of the areas that the IDF is considering evacuating Palestinian civilians when they are evacuated from Rafah. That remains to be seen. Move on to where the bulk of the fighting is in the southern parts of the Gaza Strip. In Khan Yunis, there was more IDF operations reported around the areas of Al-Amal Hospital, including several rounds of arrests. In addition, the al-Qassam Brigades reported intense fighting in the Abasana Kabira area, which is the eastern part of Khan Yunis. Reports include substantial fighting and face-to-face gun battles. Al-Qassam reported several IDF soldiers were killed as a result of these battles. In addition, the Al-Quds Brigades, that is the military wing of the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, reported combined ambushes against IDF soldiers soldiers in the heart of Khan Yunis, including gunfire, explosive devices, and mortars. The IDF also reported intensive gun battles in the eastern parts of Khan Yunis as well as in the western parts of Khan Yunis, where the IDF is still engaged with one of Hamas's battalions in the area. In Rafah, there are scores of casualties reported as a result of the massive attack that accompanied the rescue operation yesterday. According to reports, as part of the rescue operation, fire-belt bombings were launched throughout the areas of Rafah in order to provide cover for the evacuating parties. Reportedly, between 80 and 100 people were killed in these bombings, including many Hamas fighters that were firing on the rescue party. Responding to this bombing specifically, the White House stated that it does not have information regarding civilian casualties that occurred as a result of the rescue operation. In addition, Israel's Finance Minister Smotrich stated that Hamas bears responsibility for using civilians as human shields, and fears from hurting civilians or from response from the United States and the world should not deter us. Regarding news about the future operation that will be in the town of Rafah, Egyptian Foreign Minister Samah Shoukry was asked today during his visit to Slovenia about the peace treaty with Israel. Egypt has repeatedly stated that it is considering suspending the peace treaty with Israel if the operation in Rafah leads to a mass evacuation of Palestinians into Egypt. He stated the peace treaty has been in effect for 40 years and will continue as long as reciprocity is maintained. He added that Egypt is applying pressure on all sides to come to a deal which will also forestall this invasion. In turn, the Wall Street Journal reported that Israel has presented to Egypt plans to establish extremely large tent cities and refugee camps, reportedly 15 different tent cities, each including 25,000 tents, for the people who would evacuate from Rafah. This is Israel's attempt to assuage Egypt's concerns that the people will have nowhere to evacuate and therefore they will all try to cross the border to enter Egypt. Apparently Israel is trying to show Egypt there actually is a plan in place. The plan includes establishing field hospitals as well, and it was reportedly going to be funded by the United States and Gulf countries. Regarding casualties, 3 IDF soldiers were reported killed in the last 24 hours in the southern parts of Khan Yunis, likely in those operations reported by the al-Qassam Brigades, bringing the total number of IDF soldiers who were killed in the Gaza Strip since the invasion began to 232. 1 IDF soldier is reported injured in the last 24 hours. The total number of IDF soldiers injured in the Gaza Strip since the invasion began is 1,327. Palestinian Health Ministry in the Gaza Strip stated that 164 Palestinians were killed in the Gaza Strip in the last 24 hours, bringing the total number of Palestinians killed in the Gaza Strip since the war began to 28,340. 67,984 Palestinians reported injured in the Gaza Strip in the last 24 hours. I was asked in a comment on yesterday's summary how many Palestinians of those who were killed are estimated to be Hamas or Palestinian Islamic Jihad operatives. So I will state that those numbers are very unknown. The Palestinian Health Ministry in the Gaza Strip only puts out the total figures of Palestinians who were killed, not distinguishing between civilians and Hamas or Palestinian Islamic Jihad operatives. In turn, the IDF does not put out its own figures about how many Palestinians were killed. The last estimate that the IDF put out about how many Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad operatives were killed was on February 1st, in which it stated that in its estimate, 10,000 Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad operatives have been killed, and another 10,000 Palestinian Islamic Jihad and Hamas operatives have been injured. So if we put those figures together, we would say that the Palestinian Health Ministry in the Gaza Strip is reporting 28,340 Palestinians have been killed, of which the IDF states roughly 10,000 are Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad operatives. Moving on to the humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip, the EU Foreign Minister Joseph Borrell stated in a press conference today alongside the head of UNRWA, Philip Lazzarini, that if countries do not restore their funding to UNRWA, the humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip is going to deteriorate much further. In that same conference, the head of UNRWA, Lazzarini, stated that he does not intend to resign despite all the allegations that Israel is leveling at him regarding the fact that UNRWA either knew about Hamas operatives using its infrastructure for terrorism or actually that UNRWA cooperated with Hamas. He added that the organization has suggested international inspection over aid that it receives and distributes in order to assuage Israel's concerns that Hamas is taking over those aid trucks. More and more reports are coming in the last weeks that showing testimonies from the Gaza Strip that Hamas is in fact taking over a large contingent of the aid trucks as they move through Rafah. Other news, Israel's Construction and Housing Minister, Yitzhak Goldknopf, today formally sent a letter appealing to the Israeli Land Authority, demanding that UNRWA be expelled from Israel and any housing or territorial arrangements between Israel and UNRWA be cancelled. Other news, it was reported today that responding to the UN's flash appeal for aid to the humanitarian situation in the Palestinian territories that was originally launched on October 12th, different countries have thus far donated $886 million US, constituting 72% of the requested $1.2 billion US to cover humanitarian needs through the end of March. Regarding the entrance of aid trucks, there was no reports in the last 24 hours regarding how many aid trucks managed to enter the Gaza Strip. There were continuous protests in Israel blocking the Nitzana crossing, that is the crossing in which trucks from Egypt are inspected in Israel before they cross through the Rafah border. Again, there were no reports from the IDF or the UN or the Palestinian Red Crescent regarding how many trucks did manage to enter. Moving on to the West Bank, there were several attacks carried out by Israeli settlers against Palestinians today. Reportedly, dozens of settlers stormed the Palestinian villages of Dama, Asira Akabilia, as well as the town of Hawara. Several dozen structures and cars were torched. Violence also broke out as Palestinians tried to defend themselves and drive the settlers out. The IDF eventually intervened and dispersed the parties. 2 Palestinians were reportedly shot and injured. It is unknown at this point if they were shot by settlers or by the military. Regarding IDF activity, there was a range of IDF raids reported in the last 24 hours in the West Bank. These included the areas of Tal Village, south of Nablus, where confrontations were erupted and several Palestinians were injured. Tamun, in the east of Tubas. Balata and Nablus, where also several engineering units were reported operating and several Palestinians were injured, as well as several different locales in the areas of Ramallah. 17 Palestinians were reported arrested in the last 24 hours throughout the West Bank. Also, moments before recording this, there was a news flash about recent activity of the IDF in the town of Jenin. We'll likely learn more about this tomorrow. In addition to this, following the United States, the United Kingdom today announced sanctioning 4 Israeli settlers on charges of violence against Palestinians. The settlers are Inon Levi, who was also sanctioned by the United States, and Moshe Sharvit. They are both accused of carrying out systematic acts of violence and intimidation against Palestinians. Tzvi Bar Yosef, who established an unauthorized outpost in the West Bank that is used in order to launch violent raids against Palestinians, and Eli Fetterman. According to the UK Foreign Minister David Cameron, the Israeli government has not acted as it promised against these settlers, and their activity threatens the national security interests of the United Kingdom in the region. Responding to this, in addition to heavy condemnation and accusations by Israeli leaders that international sanctions actually constitute the new anti-Semitism, there was also a meeting today between Prime Minister Netanyahu and Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich to discuss this recent wave of sanctions against Israeli settlers, because there's growing concern that the sanctions may gradually expand in order to also be applied against either leaders in Israel, local council leaders in the West Bank, or IDF officers who are in charge of different areas in the West Bank. Moving on to the northern parts of Israel, southern parts of Lebanon, there were continuous rockets and missiles sent from Lebanon towards Israel. However, like yesterday, these are less than the barrages of the last several days. 2 anti-tank missiles were fired towards the areas of Hardov. Rocket barrages were sent towards the areas of Zerit. El Miadin also reported gunfire against several different IDF outposts in the western Galilee. Regarding IDF activity, the IDF reported that it attacked Hezbollah infrastructure in the areas of Tolusa, and a military structure was also attacked in the Brida village. Hezbollah lookout posts were attacked with mortars in the areas of El Khayam. Other attacks were also reported in El Adaisa, targeting military structures and compounds in the areas of Ter Herfa, El Jabin, and Maruna Ras as well. Al-Akhbar also reported that in the attack in Tolusa, a house was fired upon, and specifically this was the house that was associated with the civil defense agency in the area. In addition to this, there was an attempted assassination reported. A car was targeted in the Maruna Ras area, reportedly aiming to kill Muhammad Alawi, who's a field commander of Hezbollah. There are conflicting reports about his condition. The Voice of Lebanon radio reported that he died. However, Al Jazeera reported that he survived. Maybe he had suffered injuries. At this point, it is unknown. Hezbollah announced the death of 2 more operatives in the last 24 hours, bringing the total number of deaths that Hezbollah has claimed have died since the war began to 190. The Al-Quds Brigades of the Palestinian Islamic Jihad reported also 2 of its operatives were killed near the Israeli border of Lebanon during a violent operation. Possibly it was those shootings against the IDF outposts. Other news, Reuters reported today that France has delivered to Lebanon a proposal to resolve the ongoing escalation between Israel and Hezbollah diplomatically. According to the report, this involves 3 phases of de-escalation. It was not reported what each phase will include. According to what was leaked, the first phase includes a 10-day de-escalation and an eventual withdrawal of Hezbollah and other armed groups to a 10-kilometer radius north of the border with Israel. Asked about this, senior Hezbollah political figure Hassan Fadlallah stated again that Hezbollah's position is that there will be no negotiating the situation in the south of Lebanon until an end to the fighting in Gaza. This has been a repeated stance of Hezbollah, while the Israeli government and the Lebanese government have both been approached by the United States, France, and different actors in order to try to resolve this. Hezbollah, the one that has to agree to withdraw up north, has repeatedly stated this is not going to happen. In Syria, there were reported of explosions in the Haleb airport in the last 24 hours. The Saudi Al-Hadith also reported that there were attacks noted in the area. However, no reports were made regarding what was actually attacked. Moving on to some of the regional developments. After an incident was reported yesterday in the Red Sea by UK MTO, the Houthi military spokesperson Yahya Saria stated that 2 nautical missiles were fired and hit a U.S. cargo ship. It was later reported, however, that the ship, the Star Iris, is actually operated by a Greek company and was in fact bound for Iran, and that the ship suffered minor damage. According to reports, the Houthis informed Tehran of their mistaken identity and firing on the ship. Moving on to some of the political developments in the last 24 hours, Francesca Albanese, the special UN envoy to the human rights situation in the Palestinian territories, who yesterday stated that the October 7th massacre did not occur as a result of anti-Semitism but as a result of Israeli oppression, has been officially declared a persona non grata in Israel. This is mostly a declarative statement. She was already barred from entering, however now, even if she obtains a diplomatic passport, she will not allow to enter. Other political news, the EU Foreign Minister Joseph Borrell stated today that the international community should reconsider its weapons supply to Israel, specifically relating to President Biden's statements that the IDF has gone over the top, and stating, if you believe too many people are being killed, maybe you need to supply less weapons. Other news, the appeals court in Netherlands ordered the country to stop exporting spare F-35 parts to Israel, citing that there's a clear risk that they are being used in serious violation of international law. These are parts that actually belong to the United States but are stored in the Netherlands and from there are exported to Israel. The Netherlands Prime Minister, Mark Rutte, is actually visiting Israel right now, and he promised to address this issue when he returns home. Other news, the Iranian Foreign Minister Hossein Amir Abdullahian is continuing his tour of the Middle East. After meetings in Lebanon and Syria, he arrived today in Qatar. Al Arabi Al Jadid reported that he will meet with Qatari Emir and the Qatari Prime Minister in order to discuss the relations between the countries and the developments in Palestine. Other news, Palestinian Authority Chairman Mahmoud Abbas is also in Qatar. He met with the Emir of Qatar, Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani. Yesterday it was reported that he is going to ask Qatar to mediate between the Palestinian Authority, and specifically the PLO, and Hamas in order to establish a new Palestinian unity technocratic government. It was not reported if he actually made that request or not. It is also not reported if he's holding any meetings with the Hamas leaders that are located in Qatar. According to some leaks, he is trying to avoid those meetings in order to not be seen in pictures with the Hamas leaders while the war is going on. Other political news, Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah met today with Palestinian Islamic Jihad leader Ziad Nahaleh. The two reportedly discussed developments and pledged to continue until achieving victory. Other political news, King Abdullah of Jordan is currently visiting the United States. He gave concluding statements after his meeting with President Biden. In the concluding statements, King Abdullah stated that the Gaza Strip cannot be separated from what's happening in the West Bank and in East Jerusalem, while President Biden stated, and I quote, "Too many Palestinians killed in the Gaza Strip were innocent civilians, including thousands of children." He added that the administration is working on a hostage deal that will buy at least 6 weeks of a truce, hoping to build something more permanent during that time. Moving on to the future of the Gaza Strip, and related to this, NBC published an article today about private conversations between President Biden and several different people, including as part of his campaign. Sources stated that Biden claims that he is trying to convince Israel to agree to a ceasefire, but Netanyahu is, quote, giving him hell. And 3 different sources recounted Biden referring to Netanyahu, quote, as an asshole. The report added that Biden feels that the United States is presenting good deals to Israel, such as the hostage deal or the Saudi deal, i.e. accepting a ceasefire and in turn normalization with Saudi Arabia, but the sources say that Biden repeatedly stating, quote, Netanyahu wants the war to drag on so he can remain in power. Responding to this, the U.S. administration is reportedly considering delaying or slowing weapons transfers to Israel. Other things that it's considering is recognizing an independent state of Palestine, all of which will have great impact on the future of the Gaza Strip and the development of the war if they in fact do take place. If you enjoy these reports, please do subscribe and turn on notifications. Give the video a like. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the comment section. I promise to address as many of those as I can. That is my report for the last 24 hours. I'll be back tomorrow.